Hi, Dr. Natalie Edmond here from Antiracism Revolution, here to talk to you a little bit about my upcoming series on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Sometimes I think I should probably be JEDI instead of DEIJ, where with justice being centered as the first thing that we need to do, that we really need to change things structurally to balance out all the hundreds of years of inequity. So my DEIJ series is a little different than maybe some corporate trainings on DEIJ, mainly because it's really about how do we become embodied? How do we do our own inner work of recognizing the ways in which oppression lives within us? That we have been breathing the air, we've been indoctrinated in our school system, in our mental health system, in so many systems of corporate America into a certain way of being. When I teach my graduate class on multiculturalism and feminism, part of what we talk about is acculturation. And we could talk about acculturation related to being racial beings, gendered beings, sexual beings, in terms of able-bodied stuff, in terms of neurotypical stuff or holistic stuff. So how do we really get to see the ways in which people begin to understand through racism and various different isms their positionality in the world, particularly in the United States? How do they begin to understand through microaggressions how they are valued or not valued? And thinking about what does it mean to have a community that represents the larger US census, which is about 60% white-bodied people, and about 40%, which is the global majority of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Asian individuals. How do we begin to go past the diversity numbers, which in some ways is the low-hanging fruit, to really equity? So how do we begin to understand the things from birth that create an advantage for some people and create a disadvantage for other people? How do we begin to deconstruct some things that really don't create a sense of inclusion or belonging? How do we critique quiet quitting as a way of having a conversation about the ways in which people don't want to be at work in the same ways that they used to be willing to tolerate it, but also recognizing that in quiet quitting, there's ableist language in that as well? How do we begin to look at what would it really take to create a culture of inclusion, but maybe a mutuality? Because inclusion, who gets to decide who's included, who's in power, who gets to decide what's professional? What would it be to be able to experience people's full abilities, full talents and gifts, rather than having it changed in order to fit into predominantly white spaces? How do we begin to look at the ways in which capitalism and racism are so intertwined, and how white supremacy culture is hurting all of us? So many of us are tired, so many of us have been changed after the global pandemic, and we can't go back. We can only go forward. And we cannot do that without being able to talk about ourselves as racial beings, without being able to look at the way patriarchy is embedded in our systems, the ways in which even the holidays that we get off, how much of it is not necessarily based on the global majority. So these are many of the conversations we'll have. It won't be just a heady conversation, but really going deep into our spirit and working to mobilize some action in our circles of influence. So I hope that I'll see you soon. Maybe check out the intro session that's free in a couple of days. Feel free to check out drnatedmond.com for more details about that and other parts of the membership community. Because a one-time training or two-time training is not enough to combat the systems of oppression that have been here through colonization. So how do we begin to see the colonizer within ourselves and begin to do something different? Take good care.